Good evening, ladies, gentlemen, non-binary folks and the like. My name is I.S. Jones, director of the Watershed Reading Series with Art Lit Lab, and it is my immense pleasure to introduce you our three readers for the evening. Lauren Shapiro, Jakky Bankong-Obi, and Caryl Pagel. The Watershed Reading Series is made possible by support from Dane Arts, with additional funds from the Endres Manufacturing Company, the Evjue Foundation Incorporated, charitable arm of the Capital Times, and the W. Jerome Frautschi Foundation, and the Pleasant T. Rowland Foundation. Please stay after the reading for a brief Q&A with our readers. Lauren Shapiro is the author of Arena with CSU Poetry Center in 2020, listed as a top poetry book from 2020 in the New York Times, and Easy Math with Sarbadine 2013, which was the winner of the Catherine A. Morton Prize and the debut Litzer Prize for Poetry. With Kevin Gonzalez, she co-edited The New Census, an anthology of contemporary American poetry. With Rescue Press 2013. She's an associate professor of English at Carnegie Mellon. Please, from the comfort and safety of your couches, give it up for Lauren Shapiro.
Thank you so much, IS. Thank you also to Rita May and Jim and Jolynn and everybody at Art Lit Lab for having me here. I was actually involved, little known fact, with the earlier version of All in New Haven, Connecticut, many, many years ago. So it's really cool to see how far you all have come and what amazing work you're doing. I really appreciate your having me here. And I'm really excited to hear work from Caryl and from Jakky too. So thanks so much for listening. I'm going to read a few poems from my most recent book, Arena. And then I'm going to read a few newer poems as well. And just to try to keep things a little bit more interesting, I'm actually going to share my screen for part of the time and show some images while I read. I've actually never been broadcast on YouTube before, so I guess we'll see how this goes. But I've been told that you won't see my face. You'll just see the screen and hear a very disembodied voice. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. So I'm going to go ahead and try to share screen now. Cenotaph. There is a reliquary on a ledge outside the bathroom. No one really knows why. I mean, that was the winter my father tried to kill himself. I was getting a haircut when I received the call, then I kept receiving it forever. I was talking about the Christmas preparations at the time, debating the kinds of lights to get or something. It must have been a muddy time, said someone. Actually, it was terrifying. Later, the doctor told us it was impossible to tell what anything meant, though he didn't use those words. Someone used the metaphor of the iceberg. You know, what's showing and what's not. Someone else mentioned black holes. None of it made any sense, but I guess they were nice gestures. I mean, at least they were trying. Someone still had to buy groceries and shovel the snow and all that. Then my father cashed out the savings account and gave us each a check. I kept trying to piece together events as though the questions could be answered logically. Then I realized I had all the wrong questions. Someone strung yellow tape to the driver's side door of the car. No one knew who had brought flowers. Some actions are more meaningful, like leaving a note. Then I remembered the baby. Oh no, where was the baby? Arena. A shirt and shoes are required, your signature on the dotted line, your fingerprints, license plate, the reason you came here in the first place, what you saw in the arena, whose blood, do you know whose blood is all over the fucking promenade? Did you come here to see someone die, to get a jolt, eat cotton candy and popcorn, hear the symphony eulogize him? Is that pig's blood? Was the sacrifice human? Was it a spectacle you wanted? A show with all the bells and whistles? A Las Vegas in lights? Were you expecting Mariah Carey? Were you waiting for the signal to applaud? Was your response pre-recorded? We ask that you wear only dark colors, out of respect, no low-cut blouses or short shorts, and try not to be the idiot who brings a boombox or drone, who posts to Instagram. Remember that this festival is also a funeral. Arena. To imagine your world encircled is to imagine it finite, a spectacle. The best place for a goring is the center of the storm, where everything is still, like a microscope the doctors pore over, probing. When the crowd quiets, it's to see the decapitation or just to breathe in, not me. How insular, I mean lucky. To be sitting in the arena, to be outside the center, the show must go on and on. If you close your eyes, it goes on. Later, you could mention what you hear, how the only reason you know it's over is the sudden and incredibly loud cheers. The wound. And when the flower opens its wound, and when the wound is mortal, fanned out like makeup spilled from a purse, and it's always your one and only wound, the one you keep coming back to, and the purse was stolen from an old lady who died before it could be returned, and there was absolutely nothing of interest in the purse anyway, and the purse was a symbol, as was the empty bus and the cat carcass in the gutter and everything else you saw that day, and in every other way the day was normal. And the famous scholar made many statements of truth that couldn't touch you, and you longed for the days you were so easily touched, and went home and became even more obsessed with the wound until everything in the house was related to the wound, and your destiny was the wound, was being with it forever and forever, letting it consume you completely, your body shedding itself like so much of nothing, and the wound opening into something else entirely, some part of your mind that had always essentially known it as home. The memory is like wool, like the toy llama made from real llama fur. That's the kind of appropriation I feel when I write about you. It's a secret about a secret, a lie about a lie. You have to open 1,000 doors and enter the endless maze to see it. The photo of the dog dying on the porch, the candy inside the candy. I would like to extract a melody from the memory, not unlike a beach. Inside a beach, there's no water anywhere at this beach. It's actually a desert. You have to use your imagination. I'm sipping a pina colada made of a pine cone. The cars going by make ruinous tracks in my daydream. The noise is consistent. I've seen it on TV, on the infomercial for a bubble that never pops. Can we get it? Can we get it? Pleads my son from inside the poppable bubble in which we live. Immobile. I fold my grief many times and cut it into a snowflake. Like any craft project, it will soon turn to trash. We are separately in this together, says my screen, always talking through my glass facade, my glass TV face. When I breathe, I imagine the virus enters brazenly. Of course, that's a human construct. So I try to think like a virus, which is to say, not to think at all. Come here to my restaurant. My daughter's scribbles try to be letters, how language pulls from a depth of want. She makes up fancy names for dishes on her menu. Rocky Badaki that resist, Haby Badaby, spelling, Fifi Fafufu, they rhyme, Mimi Badudu, which is a way to sound real. They have many syllables, which is a way to sound expensive. She goes from talking to singing in her voice and understanding. A cadence changes meaning. These are the rules. In English, you don't have to be literate to know. And I'm just going to read a few short pieces from a longer work called Brid that I've been working on. I watch nature's slow pace against the quickening tempo of Instagram and Twitter, twin doors I open in the expanse. People throw flashlights and photographs like shouts in the forest. This is the spot where we can hear an echo, says my son, pausing on our walk, and we talk out loud to ourselves for a while. For spa day, we scrub our feet with pebbly salves, play the sounds of the rainforest on low. Blue toenails this time, says my son. I plug in the hair straightener and get the towels. We perform in front of the picture windows in the living room, acting out our adventure. In each house, its own intimacy, like stones on a beach, waiting for the tide. My daughter won't let me throw anything away. She makes a monster from empty tape dispensers and googly eyes, a trophy from a Happy Meal container. She cuts up everything and tapes it back together. My friend says they can't find any toilet paper. We are always running out of tape. Large chunks of snow drop from trees. A bird dives. The word bird, a mistaken spelling of the original brid. Mistakes channel world, a worldview, a tear in a web that becomes an ocular hole, a tunnel into new brightness. The map of Pennsylvania counties is marked in shaded oranges and reds by case count. In high school, I painted a portrait of my father in that palette without realizing its anger. Suggestion like a flip book missing pages. Once a person could feel fear by feeling eerie. Now it just describes a thing, an uncertainty. The neighbors embrace the holidays, put up elaborate decorations and lights. We carve jack-o'-lanterns and make a haunted house out of dollar store black tablecloths. When it passes, we invent our own holidays. A Stuffy's birthday, Leaf Day. We celebrate the leaves in our lives, something we should have been doing all along. The New York Times prints a full-page spread of headshots of the deceased, but it backfires. They printed all the old people, says my husband. It looks like only the old are dying. This isn't a marketing scheme, I think, but somehow it is. We make things for my daughter's Stuffy, a throne, a Christmas stocking, a stuffed carrot. Sewing like chopping or reading, a distraction. Focus like a warm blanket over a hole, an old scab peeling to fresh skin. Rainbow Bunny wants a yo-yo, she says. Rainbow Bunny wants a coloring book. We run out of tape. In reading about privilege, a privilege, interrogation from inter between rogare to ask, a question between the questions. What's hidden behind a grave, a stone as a monument to a grief unexperienced? Looking at the stone, the grief a whisper in the ear. More paper, milk, tape. I make the same list again. My daughter confuses lasagna with vagina. What are we eating? She asks, uncertain. Her lack of knowledge of time. What day is it? How many more days are there? Until what? I ask. I know Santa has the elves, but do you think the Easter Bunny steals gifts? My daughter asks. No, she magics them, I answer. Then why does Santa need elves? Logic drilling holes into imagination, a sieve held beneath the finished pasta, draining, I don't know, an expanse waiting for puncture. The children's blocks have magnets these days. My daughter asks for sand sanitizer. The words stick, a family joke. We agree it sounds better that way. It's not letting me in, says my daughter. What isn't? The screen. When this is over, I'm going to kiss everyone, someone writes on Twitter. Nostalgia like returning to a favorite childhood aquarium, only they've changed all the exhibits. The specialty store sells obscure candy you can tell by the font on the packaging. How many days are there again? Asks my daughter. Until what? I ask. Until the next leaf day. When my son was little, he thought the end of the calendar meant the end of the world. No, no, I reassure him. We just get a new calendar. And what about the next year? He asks. We get another one, I say happily. And then we die, he says. Quarantine stretches its languid body. Why did someone have to go and eat a bat? My son asks. That's not quite right, I say. It's more an outcome of our actions than a single mistake. Then why are we destroying the earth? He wants to know. I don't know, because it lets us lead these lives we're used to? Because we won't look far enough ahead? No, he says. I mean, why are we, this family, destroying the earth? Lack of action as a deep mistake. How to start a new way of living completely. When this is all over, a kind of ignorance. Take the opportunity. How many more days are there, says my daughter. Meaning made through circumstance. The real answer is, I don't know. Thank you so much for listening.
Give it up one more time for Lauren Shapiro from the comfort of your seats. Up next, we have Jakky Bankong-Obi. Jakky Bankong-Obi is a communications consultant currently living and writing in Abuja, Nigeria. Her work has been featured or forthcoming in London Grip, the Kalahari Review, Amber Flowzine, Zarf Poetry, Gutter Magazine, Hobart Pulp, Pigeonholes, Evjue Magazine, Corbel Stone Press, Memento, an anthology of contemporary Nigerian poetry, and others. She enjoys long walks, yoga, and dabbling in nature photography. Give it up for your seats from Jakky.
Hello. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Isis. And of course, thank you, Adlib Lab, for asking me to read along with Lauren and Caryl. And James, Rita, thank you, everyone who has joined us from all over the world. And I think, is my mom here? I think my mom is here somewhere. Okay, so thank you. So I'm going to be reading a few of my poems. I don't have a collection yet, but I'm currently working on one. So I hope by the end of the year, I'll get something going, hopefully, So I'll be reading, the first poem I'll be reading is called Brazen, which was written for my grandmom, who died the year I gave birth to my son. In fact, the month I gave birth to my son, like 2 weeks, before I gave birth to my son. So, and she played a really big influence in my childhood. I used to spend a lot of time with her those days in the village. So I felt like when I started writing, I was inspired to write something from my childhood, from some of, those practices that she taught me, which I find now to be little moments to come, to bring some kind of, should I say, I don't want to say spirituality because I'm not really, religious, but I feel like those practices were things that things that ground me now. So I wanted to write something in that regard. So this, I wrote, it's a free verse, sort of. It's more like an incantation. in a way, because everything just, the words and the lines just go together. You know, it's like what the Yoruba people will call like an oriki. It's like praise singing in a way, but you know. So here, praising for my grandmother. Herbs cooked in blackened pot, in water, adding nothing, over open flame. Invoke the mother, the father, all the ancestors near and far. Dig earth, plant things, pull roots, chop at stems, deep cuts, swift and beautiful snips, light-handed razor, sharp kisses of pain, make place for new growth. Intrude, pour salt on fresh wound, kill the tender thing while it is still new, give no room for the old malice to creep in. Apothetize for festering sores, draw out poison from the hidden crevices. Entice the harm out of limbs of comfort. Ori and palm kernel oil spell the air. Stand in moon shadow, give in to yearning. Cross ×3, make wishes. Pour water from the calabash, make a libation. Spittle to navel, your girl child comes, bearing your mother again. In the hot afternoon sun, cut 2 marks on the baby's soft skin, mar and blemish. Dark ash from the night lamp, rub in, ward off infant death. With pestle and stone feed, the lemongrass and stalk, slender the reeds, gallant the dance, wave the hills, palm wine and kola nut rhythm and woo, see through the sweet, the tangy, the pine and sing, impudent green till tawny, till old and worn, make fire on yesterday's white ash, cogent of our conquest. Bridge to the root, maze wonder, make more, take life, barefoot and brazen, brazen, brazen. Okay, so the next poem I'm gonna be reading was published, I think, for the first inaugural issue for Pipe Wrench magazine. It was like, and the issue was focused on, you know, Black issues, Black Lives Matter, activism and all of that. So I was asked to read, you know, to write the poem for the inaugural issue. And I wrote it for a friend of mine who died, you know, from a stray bullet, you know, like from police, as you know, trigger happy police. So I wrote it for him. He's a child friend of mine who's been dead for over a decade now. But, you know, I think anyone who has lost someone from either state-sponsored violence, police violence, the pain never really goes away, you know. So it's called False Leads. For G, after reading Brian Mason Campbell and Nazim Hikmet. In the receding light of the day, my eyes are thirsty, the world is fine. You could never get enough of grassy meadows, ribbons of green and lemon, fronding and cheerful. I am at the doorway of the police station. A slow wind ruffles through the field of lemongrass. And beyond, there are birds singing the evening. I want to believe I can hear your voice in the fray. Inside, someone undone by grief crows brokenly. All this grieving and the dead stay dead. And it's true, we are born with the same assurance of death, meaning we do not always have to go looking for some things to find us. The city is known for its throng of mourning doves. To leave the roost is to know the way back. But the real injury is a stray bullet, the indifference of its plunder, a raptor's swoop and stolid violence. A gun shot inside the dove's nest would hardly miss, by which I mean the plume is flight. I could never look in the faces of the dead on the news screens, though the bodies pile and pile. But look at it this way. The point isn't just about how hard it is to face the cruelty of loss, but to stay soft, to grow new wings from the cracks. Okay, so the next one I'll be reading, I actually wrote this in response to a prompt, for a myth. This magazine was calling for people with, for myth from different cultures, spirituality, nature and ecology of nature, myth, humanity, and all of that. So I wrote this poem in response to that. It's called The Bare Facts of Our Divergences. They said there are no maps for how migratory birds fly. It's all instinct, wholly primal, something like desire, the astonishing fever of it. A call in the blood for the object of one's deepest longing that sets a heart ripping out of his cage towards a horizon that is ultimately disappearing. If I were to die anywhere on this kind I'm growing, my mother's womb is as good a place to root and bud. Blessed be my earthing in the rainforest and umber. But I am made of forgotten gods and the dispersal of neem leaves in duress of harmattan winds. So I libate to the deep luring of woman in the Medusa, because in all her wildest fury and delirium, against an insatiate world, love is still the strongest of shields for all that is my tender and veiled spine. And in this age-old coming and going, where the sun is to skin, what the sea is to fish, I see drown me in the depths of this ocean, tied me in the bare facts of all her divergences. So my last poem I'm gonna be reading is called Sommer in Lake Chad. I like to think of myself as a nature and place poet, but I don't think so. Basically, I just write about the things that I love or whatever inspires me. I don't know how to, maybe I should say I'm still finding my voice. I'm not sure I can describe myself, say this is what I write about, but for now, nature plays a lot of, influence in what I write. So I'm writing about the Lake Chad, which is the Lake Chad Basin shared by some countries on the Horn of Africa here. So here goes. October winds into the lake's basin and the leaves retreat to safety. The soil, prismatic and filigree as an ache, familiar enough to expect it. And because no one stops time in the endorheric, the sun on spring's September brown, and browning still, fields of elephant grass, papyri and reed pickle, then vanish in the wild. Heat-stroked, baobab and acacia bark break, of load to wax, then congeal. Remember, everything begins with optimism. In the mother tongue, there are 7 possible translations for any tree. It's true we were once a forest, but we never tried hard enough. Plundering its ceaseless vehemence, the heat crowns everything in petaled fire. Nothing left green or extant, not water, oil, or salt, meaning nothing we could keep and the body prevails. And as the scarcity eventuates, the topography leaches, then fossils. Laid bare, the bones rattle and call out to their bygone history. And the answer is a thirsty truth in the mouth of an African summer, once restless.
I think we lost Jakky temporarily. But until she comes back, please give it up one more time for Jakky Bankong-Obi from the comfort of your seats. Thank you so much. And we're going to go into our last reader, Caryl Pagel. Caryl Pagel is the author of 2 books of poetry and an essay collection, Out of Nowhere into Nothing, from FC2, which came out last year in 2020. She is the co-founder of Rescue Press, a poetry editor at Jubilat, and the director of the Cleveland State University Poetry Center. Pagel teaches poetry and nonfiction in the NEO MFA program in Northeast Ohio. Please give it up for Caryl A. Pagel.
Thank you so much, IS. And Jakky, it's good to see. Oh, yeah, good, she's back. That was a beautiful reading. Thank you to Lauren. I loved hearing those new poems, and I'm so glad that we're doing this today. I'm gonna read from an essay from the new book that IS mentioned, which is called Out of Nowhere into Nothing, and it's called Sinkhole Suite. And just to mention, there's an essay that's too long to read that's at the end of the book that's all about Madison, which is a place that I love dearly and used to live at. So this is called Sinkhole Suite. 1. There was a bathtub in the kitchen. I shaved my legs while a roommate sauteed spinach, and Dee perched shakily on the table, his leather-booted feet tipping back a wooden chair, while he belted out songs from Viva Last Blues. This was Prague, early 2004. Bush was president, and we were starting a war. Each door in the communist-era apartment opened to the next, forming a roiling circular river of flannel scarves, discolored mugs, knit mittens, empty wine bottles, and firewood. When you are young, there is the feeling of nothing to do. Some of us were in art school. Outside, we watched strangers melt together under slate skies in a vague shadow of unrest. I vowed to write only for others. We were always walking by the sausage stand on the way to the castle. Dobry den, we would crow when entering the corner store. I had fled my home, Chicago, in a wild grief. Oil popped in the pan as the water drained. 2. The Space Out competition, hosted annually in South Korea, determines who can do nothing for the longest. Nothing being clearly defined, no sleeping, texting, meditating, or eating, the most specific of the most common acts. Participants focus on spacing out. Teenagers sit in a park slumped on lawn furniture with sun umbrellas and floppy hats. They languish on bright blue mats in such a way that a stranger could easily mistake the scene for a sleepy yoga class. Inspired by an overwhelming sense of productivity-oriented melancholy and excessive professional burnout, Whoops Yang, the event's curator, claimed that after much angst, an oppressive work schedule, and years of technology overload, quote, we would all feel better about doing nothing if we did nothing together as a group. There's a social component to the lack, as if to not do should be a sponsored sport. According to an article in Vice, a broadcaster narrates the event and onlookers gawk at the proceedings from surrounding office buildings. Whoops Yang says the idea of doing nothing is catching on, spreading slowly to other nations. Last year's winner, a local rapper, claims to have spent a fair amount of time practicing for the contest at home. 3. I have nothing to say and I am saying it, writes John Cage in Lecture on Nothing, insisting that a work's strengths depend upon its structure more than message, that form must be patterned. Oh, oops, I missed a page there. Going on to 4. Doing nothing is often the reward for having everything. If you are born into nothing, you are regularly required to do more and give more and feel worse as a sort of cost to the journey of surviving. Few people do nothing and want nothing. If you are accustomed to doing nothing from the beginning of your life, say because someone else is doing the things you should be doing for you, you might be asked to do something for a while to prove you can, that you are capable, and then in celebration of doing anything at all, you are allowed to do nothing else forever. For some, the consequence of doing something competently, let alone well, is to be repeatedly tasked with doing everything for everyone forever. It is still true that if you identify as a man, quite often, after having done very little, you may relax and do no more, at least until you feel ready. 5. Niederker. I'm pillowed and padded, pale and puffing, lifting household stuffing. Carpets, dishes, benches, fishes. I've spent my life in nothing. 6. This baby I'm looking at on my phone sees nothing, says nothing, understands nothing. He's a mass of bubbly gurgles and excrement. This baby who I'm looking at on my phone is a new baby, fresh, dressed in blue with petite ankles and wise eyes. He's my brother's child, named after my father. He concentrates on what is most critical: warmth, skin, mom, fear. He represents more than he apprehends, born an echo. Next is a picture of my niece, E, who is extremely interested in the dog bowl. E sleeps with a white noise machine meant to resemble the sounds of nothing, which for her are the muted booms of the forgotten womb. 7. Let us head nowhere together, knowing nothing, palm in palm, a blessing. 8. In Prague, we ate fried cheese sandwiches while walking from one apartment to another. I wore long knit sweaters and dresses over pants. Photos disclose my dirty hair. What else is there to remember? We frequented the Marquis de Sade. On a trip to a friend's cabin in the woods of Slovakia, we sipped his father's homemade moonshine. There was tea and music, long walks in the park. I remember a painting at the National Gallery, 3 boxes, or was it 3 birds, hand-drawn in ink, plain and thick. I couldn't tell you exactly what it looked like, but the lines have lived in me as a feeling ever since. 9. King Lear. Nothing will come of nothing, speak again. 10. We actively practice doing nothing. It's harder than it looks, but very satisfying. There's no cell phone service and only infrequent access to the internet. I stop reading the news. I stop talking to friends and family. Sometimes I stare for long moments at nothing. Others I focus on the wall. Everywhere I turn, I have nothing to do. I miss the dog. The patterns in the rug are redundant. I return to the window. In a natural setting, I find that every shape resembles a deer. I try to remember what it is I have been doing with my life until this point. Was it meaningful? Was it clear? I shower and go to the grocery store. I get in the car and I steer. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Ooh, Caryl, that was stunning. Give it up for all 3 of our readers from the comfort of your homes. Thank you so much, everyone. That was such a beautiful, refreshing reading. I've had a very long day, and sometimes it feels good just to sit and hear amazing literary works. That makes me feel more in tune with the world and less alone and more invigorated to write again myself. Fantastic. So without further ado, let us kind of get into the Q&A, and our wonderful tech person Jim will filter in questions as we go in. So for all of our readers, please turn on your cameras and unmute your mics if you want, so I could ask you a few questions. So this question is for Caryl and Jakky, and obviously Lauren, of course, please feel free to answer this as well. So I'm so curious about how parenthood, but uniquely motherhood affects your writing practices, your writing influences, the times that you're able to squirrel away to be able to write. How are you able to keep up a consistent writing regimen or practice with this very big obligation that comes with motherhood, that comes with another person being attached to you for the rest of your life, quite literally?
Jakky, if you want to go first, I feel bad you got cut off right at the end.
Thank you, Caryl. I know, well, it's one of those things that happen with network sometimes here. So, I mean, I was really hoping that I wouldn't have to go through that. Well, I asked, that question is really great. But for me, basically, I started writing as a mom. So it just it just happened. So, and then of course I have like my day job. So I have to go, to work and sorry, I lost my earpiece there, sorry. So I think what I do sometimes, when my son goes to bed, say around 8:30 in the evenings, so I try to read and then maybe like write one or two things. Then because of the pandemic, I think I should say I was kind of lucky. I started writing just about the year just before the pandemic. So the pandemic year, being at home, I think I just, like maybe most people, the first few months I didn't write anything because I was like, how am I going to do this? Anxiety and all of that. But the pandemic year really gave me that time to put into my craft while my son was in school. I would just try to do my own work, But I think most times I just try to write at night when my son is asleep. Then if I wake up earlier, to get ready for school, if I can, sometimes a few minutes or 30 minutes before, and then just try to read, make notes. Then most weekends he goes to his dad, so I'm usually free. Right now I'm quite free, because if I was reading and he was at home, there's a possibility he will come out to be like, what's going on, So that helps. I think that helps. When I can write, that's how I just roll with that. And then sometimes I just go, honey, I need to walk, I need to write, and so you have to give me 1 hour or something. So that's what I just try to be creative about it.
Caryl, would you like to also hop in and answer this question?
Sure. Yeah, I loved that answer, Jakky, and especially because I feel like I'm still like looking for tips or suggestions. And I'm also looking forward to, my kid is 2, and so he's just, starting to talk and say goofy things. But I love like that gesture, for example, like what Lauren was doing in her new work of just like pulling the material straight from the source. I was laughing, I was on mute, but I was laughing pretty hard at that lasagna vagina line taken from your daughter. So I'm excited for when my son starts, saying ever more crazy things. But yeah, I mean, the book that I read from was written before I had a kid. And I don't really, I'm bad at answering a question like this because I wasn't really great at knowing how I wrote before I had a kid either. I'm a pretty erratic, sporadic writer. I never had the kind of discipline that I wanted. Not meaning, I write often enough, but I don't have a great practice. And so I thought maybe having less time would lead me to have a better practice. And it hasn't exactly yet, but I hope it will. So I haven't been writing very much at all. And yet, that said, I feel like I think about writing more than ever. I think that that's just because there's like a lot of time with a kid where you're kind of like I don't know, walking around the block or playing some game where you're, you know, my creativity is all fired up or something. So I just have to have, I have to have a pen nearby more often, I think is probably the most straightforward solution. Lauren, I don't know if you have tips. I feel like you've said before you're a morning writer.
Oh, I've just taken to locking the kids in the basement. Not really, I'm just joking. I don't have any wonderful things to say about it. I think I get a lot of great ideas and I don't have a lot of time. And even when I do have time, I find ways to fill it in less meaningful ways. So I don't think there's like a lesson to be had, at least from my vantage point. I think what Carol's saying is right. Like I think a lot more, and I think that like it's not fallow time. Like not to be producing is not fallow time. Like you can be thinking and preparing for the next thing. You can't just, this is something I tell my students a lot because everyone just wants to write and write and write and write. And it's like, well, you have to read, you have to think, you have to be doing other things. You can't just be generating work all the time. So I think it's all important, you know? And I don't know that the time you spend like physically putting the words down is necessarily even more important than other things that lead into it. So yeah, I don't have any great tips for anyone. Sorry.
Well, you know, I want nothing but honest responses. This is a question specifically for you, Lauren, but obviously all of you can chime in. You've won quite a few awards and you're relatively decorated in that regard. I'm curious about what advice you can give either emerging writers on how to best strategically put your work out for prizes, whether it's for books or even just for individual prizes for a small like packet of poems. How would you best assess when it's a good time to send out work for a prize, maybe based on the judges, based on the prize itself, and maybe just your general philosophy or maybe ethos about the prize gambit as it is?
Yeah, I mean, I will just be honest and say that I'm really bad at sending my work out. I've never been good at it. It's never been something that I've felt very driven to do. I know other people feel differently about that, and I totally respect that. I think it's great to be published and get your work out there, and I do really value that in hindsight. But the actual act of it is not something that I consider myself to be very good at. There came a point where like I have to publish now to keep my job. You know what I mean? Like I have to publish, and I want to publish, but it took me a lot longer to write my second book than it did to write my first book, like a lot longer. And I will say that with my first book, I almost didn't submit. I just submitted it to a bunch of different presses. And, you know, when you're submitting a book of poetry, you basically have to just send it out to all the prizes and all the open reading periods. And I almost did not submit it to Sarah Band because I saw that Marie Howe was the judge. And I thought, I love her work, but she's never going to like mine. She's never going to like my work because we just write very differently, and she's not going to like this book. Why would I even bother submitting it? And then I won that prize, which I think is a testament to her open-mindedness, you know, and her ability to find value in work that's different than her own. So I would say do not just submit to places because you think the judge is going to value your aesthetic. I think that, you know, these judges, some of whom are just really talented writers and teachers, got there because of their open-mindedness. So, you know, I would just say, yeah, bet on yourself. Yeah, just send it out everywhere. The more, the better, you know. And I don't really know. I will say my second book, I'll be totally honest, I sent it back to the same publisher because they actually had the right of first refusal on that book, and they hated it, you know, and they just flat out told me, this is nowhere near done, take another year, don't, you know, it's basically trash. And I was so hurt by that. It was like deeply upsetting to me because it had taken me so long to write the book. But when I had like picked myself off the ground, I went back and like sent it out to some places, and it just wasn't the right fit for that press. You know, that's really what it was. It just wasn't the right fit. And it found its right fit, you know, with CSU Poetry Center, who did a phenomenal job with it. And I couldn't be happier. So I just think, you know, it's like a series of ups and downs. You just have to like keep picking yourself up and scraping it together, I guess.
Right. Wonderful. Thank you. And I've heard really good things about CSU Press, so I'm happy that, you know, it ended up working out in the end. That's fantastic. Jakky, you might have a different experience, but I really would like to hear your response. I say different experience because you're not in the States, but as an artist myself, the pandemic has tremendously affected my output. That the pandemic plus me also recently graduating, I'm just kind of like, wow, I'm in the house for 15 hours out of the day. I have to look at the same place where I also sleep. I'm tired. My question is, how has isolation, I mean, I'm sure by now many of you have gotten the chance to see friends and loved ones now that things are a bit more relaxed, but I'm curious about how the last year in isolation has changed your relationship to your craft, for better or for worse. And what were some practices or maybe some firm boundaries you made to safeguard your practice, even if you maybe weren't deliberately writing every day? So for example, for me, one thing I did is that I never worked in a place where I rest. So the living room was only for work and the bedroom was only for rest. So that way I have some sort of boundaries around my rest and as well as my studying.
Okay, so basically, like I said, you know, I started writing the year before the pandemic. So I think I just wrote like a couple of poems, and a couple of poems that got published, and then the other ones that are waiting or whatever. You know, so but when the pandemic started, I was really anxious. You know, it was so I live with my son lives with me, then my mom lives with me, and you know, basically it was just you know, it was such an anxious time, you know, and all that. So for the first few months, I don't think I wrote anything. I was just like doing the whole, it's another day. Okay, so what do we do? How do I keep my son engaged and all that? So I didn't really write anything. I was just in this funk. But I think I remember a friend of mine who is also like a poet from Ghana, you know, Henny. And I think he just said, I don't know, maybe it's just because of work and all that. I just had this thing where, you know, I never used to write on my phone or on my laptop. I started writing via, you know, just taking notes. That's what I used to do, like by hand. I don't know, maybe from having journals and all of that from childhood. I wasn't writing, but I used to journal, you know. So I just used to take notes. If, you know, some lines come, I just put them down. I actually didn't even know it was poetry I was writing. It was my brother who just told me, hey, send your poems. I always tell people, I said writing, it's just so strange, funny. I didn't think I was a writer. I was doing something as I was working. And then someday I used to have this Instagram page where I used to put like pictures I take, and I just like make short notes on the. So my brother just goes, as you're Nigerian, so you know how elder brothers in Nigeria, they're like your dad or something, you know, they're also. So someday he just sends me a message on WhatsApp and he just goes, hey, madam. He just sent me like emails, like email addresses, and goes, you see those things you do on Instagram, send them here, you know? So I was like, hello. And I think I remember the first emails I wrote to editors. It was like I was writing like work email because I didn't even know how to, you know, so I just go, okay, hello, your journal is really amazing or something. Would you have this? I didn't know how to even write the, you know. And I live in Abuja. Frankly, haven't even met any poet before, like here in Abuja and all that. So it was just really, I think I was doing it on my own. But during the pandemic year, writers in Nigeria started trying to bring me in and just like, you know, so that helped. So what I started doing was, I'll stay up. When I started writing, I used to stay up until like maybe like 2, 3, just writing
Mm-hmm.
when everybody has gone to bed. So I just had this deal with my son. My son is a big boy. He's 9 now. So it just goes, you know how to make your breakfast, right? Like cereal. Yeah, like, right? Whatever you want and stuff. This is it, So he goes, yes. I said, okay. So what we do is we have like a 2-bedroom. My mom stays in the other room. We both sleep in this room. So writing in that room is just usually doesn't work. So when he's asleep, I just, okay. So if you wake up and I'm sleeping, my man, there's no school, nothing. Just go eat, watch TV. Then when I wake up, whenever, then we can now go through your own book, school, and all that. So I think it was just that staying up late and not having to go to work the next morning, that kind of now gave me time to really read and write, and all of that. But the first few months, no, I couldn't like put anything to paper. But just having that constant, not going to bed when everybody's going to bed, staying up for the 3 or 4 hours. So that's how I did it. That's how I think I wrote quite a bit, but I didn't just write. I also like got into editing, started working with Ice Flow, the press, I had that opportunity to become their co-editor and all of that. So I just got into like all of that. That's what I did. And that's what I still do now because I have to go to work, like Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Thank you for that answer. Do either of you, Lauren, Caryl, want to chime in?
I'll just say that I loved that answer from Jakky, and I had like the complete kind of opposite energy trajectory. Like when the pandemic started, I felt for some reason it must have been like the adrenaline or like the feeling of like all right,
we're dying.
Yeah, exactly. Like the world's ending, everything's messed up. Okay, I've got to do this, or I've got to do something. Or like there were like little spaces of time I found at the beginning because the whole world felt a little bit, panic and messed up, but it was almost like, is this like a snow day or something? Like no one was sure what to do with the time exactly. And so I thought, well, just to start writing again, I'll write things that I wanted to like write things as part of like the community or like out into the world really fast. And so I wrote just like a handful of book reviews right at the beginning, which is something I hadn't done in years and felt really good. It's like, okay, this is like 1 to 3 pages and I can focus on somebody else's work and I can do something nice in the world. And I did it. And then I just like crashed, or like the world caught up and I realized, that this wasn't like a snow week, that this was, the new life. And then I haven't been able to write as much really in the last year, mostly because of work stuff. But I also like Jakky's reminder to journal, to just like write physically by hand. I think that's smart and something I'm going to try and do more of.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think those are great answers. I don't have too much to add. I think the pandemic affected me in terms of like, for me, a lot of it was about time, and like my understanding of time changed a lot. And that I think affected my work a lot. And so I wasn't that prolific. I haven't been that prolific during quarantine because I have 2 kids and, a job and everything. But I think just like reconnecting with my family members in different ways and like understanding my relationships to people in different ways and thinking about how we communicate and language itself. All of these things kind of have made their way into what I'm currently working on. So I think it's been like fruitful, maybe not like fully on the page, but definitely in the generative process.
Thank you. So my last question for you all, and this is a question I always love to ask. I'm always excited about literary lineage. Who was the writer that made you all feel like, damn, I could be a writer. I could do this. I'm excited to try and do this work.
I can give two like fast answers. I feel like that's such a great question and like a totally impossible one to answer in that like there's so many folks, but just in terms of the book that I just read from, I would say that two really big influences on that book were W.G. Sebald and Renata Adler. And then just because she kind of came up in the excerpt of the essay that I read and has a Wisconsin tie-in, Lorene Niedeker's a huge, huge influence on my poetry. So those are, I guess that's three. Yeah.
Okay. So for me, I think, like I said, this whole thing was basically accidental, really. I didn't start out with any kind of background in writing, none, like never even been to a literature class, don't really know the basics. But like I said, and then my mom was a teacher, so there were always books around my house. My dad used to be a journalist and all of that, so when it comes to books, we always had books, but not really poems. I don't know. Especially, like, I know that IS will, she knows the way the Nigerian society can be, so poetry is not really just beginning to be a thing. Maybe also just in our circle. I might just be, because the rest of the country, we are millions here, and, education is a problem and all of that. So I wasn't exposed to poetry per se, aside the usual quotes that you see around, popular poems. Of course, you read Shakespeare and all that, but I remember the year I was pregnant, and I think I started reading Rumi, the Persian. So that was the first time I read poetry, and it was like, there was just this thing inside me, like my soul it was just like opening. I was like, words can do this. Like, it was, I mean, I'm getting goosebumps talking about this. It was like, really, like, I couldn't believe it. It was like, and then I was going through my own personal, like, crisis, how stuff not just going, but it was like every time I was just reading this book, and it was like everything I was like, oh my God, yes. I was just going, yes. In fact, my friend was like, I'm sure you're going to call your child Rumi or something, because you're always posting up this thing on your BlackBerry, this. So it was like, I said, no, not really, because I know, but I just love this. And then, so when that was happening on Instagram, quotes here and there, but then I think the first full, aside Rumi, the first full book, like the first full book of poets that currently writing, I read. I think I can't read. Was it? I think it was Ada Lyman's book.
Ada Limon, yeah.
Yeah. I think, okay, that's how it was her book, and I read that book, and I was like, oh my God, I want to write like this. Like, I just had that thing. It was like, I just want to write like this. And then, so I started asking myself, but what about like Nigerians? I'm familiar with older Nigerian literature, because of home and all that. So I was just asking myself, what about like young Nigerians? What are they doing and all of that? Mm-hmm. And I think the first person's poetry I read was Romeo, Real Gun. And that was just it. I just fell in love with. So it was Rumi. It was either Lehman, and then there was Romeo. Then I now started discovering through Twitter every other person's work. So I think that's it.
Right, right. Yeah, Rumi and Natalie Limon, they're incredible, amazing. Laura, did you have a chance to answer?
Oh, no, I haven't yet. Yeah, I mean, I came to poetry when I was a lot younger, probably more through like beat poets and then Sylvia Plath and Sexton, kind of confessional poets. But I would say influences also probably like I was pretty heavily influenced by some Russian writers, both fiction and then also kind of absurdist poets like Daniel Karms. Franz Kafka was a big influence for me. So I don't know. I think I guess like in terms of how I came to poetry, it was probably maybe a more standard route in this country, at least. I feel like the beat poets are like a gateway for a lot of younger people to get into poetry. And then kind of finding the confessional writers, I guess, and kind of moving on from there to find my own interests, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful, thank you. With that, I will conclude the evening. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much to our beautiful readers. Thank you so much to you at home from the comfort and safety of your couches. If you like this reading, please follow us on all the social media at Art Lit Lab. Please also be mindful to check out our page and to donate. We want to thank Dane Arts again for making this sort of programming possible. Thank you once again to our amazing readers, and have a good night, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye, guys.